Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 4 of the Student Agencies podcast. Today, Dan and I are thrilled to welcome Turk, one of our previous presidents since 2015. But yeah, Turk, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wooly. Good to see you, Dan. Yeah, my name is Turk. I was a part of student agencies for 3 out of the 4.5 years I was a student at Cornell. Quick background, started off as the Big Red Shipping and Storage General Manager, went on to do the job of a real estate manager, and then my last year, Kyle convinced me, the CEO at the time, to be president, and was one of probably the most immersive experiences I think I'll have in my professional career as a student. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stories to talk about. Curious to see how student agencies evolved since I've graduated. So, really interested to hear about how things have changed, but looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Great. Yep.
Perfect. I'll kick us off with the first question.
Yeah.
Turk, can you tell me a story about something you learned at student agencies that no classroom could have ever taught you?
Yeah. Great question. I was thinking a bit more about this as we were preparing to be on this podcast, as I was preparing to be on this podcast, and like what really, I think taking a step back, I initially tried to apply or went through the whole business fraternity rush process. A lot of my friends were doing it, didn't quite get in, didn't make it far in the process, and at the time was a little bummed out and heard about um, heard about student agencies during the recruitment cycle in one of my intro business AIM courses, and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. I can, make a salary, get some experiential learning in the process. And really, I think that's what kickstarted my interest here. And I think in high school, I worked in restaurants and had a little bit more of general management experience. And so dove right in. And I think that looking back 4 years through being an economics major with a business minor, doing courses in hotel school, doing hotels in the grad business school, probably the biggest differentiator, I think, in student agencies versus the classroom is I think Cornell does a great job, if you go to class, uh, teaching you the ins and outs of, I guess, running a business. And so from reading a P&L, how operations works, how EBITDA helps increase shareholder value at the end of the day for a public company versus a private company, you learn all the ins and outs. But at student agencies, when you're given the keys to a business and you're saying, hey, your earning potential is directly correlated with the growth and the execution you have for this business, and you start thinking more like a owner than just an operator, I think that's what you don't probably get in the student classroom at Cornell, which you get at student agencies. And so, like a good example, you learn about controlling COGS and how that helps drive better margins to help scale the business. But when the money comes out of your own pocket at the end of the day, I don't know if this still happens. We had profit sharing back when I was a manager, and some businesses, like the operational businesses, you got a direct cut or direct percentage of EBITDA, and you could see how that impacts your ability as a not only a business manager but also a people manager, right? I think there's ways you influence to make sure that people aren't necessarily having to work overtime. You're stepping in, you're starting to think about how you can optimize for the business, but also for your own earning potential, and that's something that I don't think I would have quite grasped if I didn't have some of these experiences at student agencies. So, yeah, I would say when it comes to SAI and the difference between a classroom, you learn everything in a textbook. Um, but when it comes to actually having that P&L and operating responsibility, it trains you earlier to think more as an owner versus an operator.
And how has that translated to your career since then?
Yeah, that's great. I think being in product, it's a really good blend between execution, but also making sure that I mean, especially as a private company that's trying to go public or trying to get acquired, you're not only thinking about, okay, like I got to optimize for the user experience, which is great. You want to make a good user experience for an app, for a product, but you're also starting to think about okay, like how do we maintain profitability at a healthy scale to make our company a bit more appetizing for a potential acquisition or a potential exit, right? And I think thinking in that regard, as opposed to, okay, I'm just going to look at my business and this is what I'm going to drive. These are the KPIs I'm going to improve. Um, Getting that early visibility, I'm like, okay, like it's not only about your only core function, but also as a whole, how are you providing value to your ultimate goals of business? And so, like at Game Time, for instance, I joined right out of the pandemic, and we were recovering from the slowdown of live events, and we're a secondary ticketing marketplace. And our goal at the time was just top line growth, get users back in the funnel, get market share. But I think, if you think a little bit more long term, it's okay, that's great. We're driving business growth, but ultimately thinking a bit more about EBITDA, thinking a bit more about how this translates ultimately to profitability. I think probably student agencies was the first um, intro to that type of thinking that I've had, especially with operational businesses like Big Red Shipping and Storage, where execution was very important, in addition to top line growth. So I definitely see it in today, my day to day, especially if you're in like this world where you're trying to take a company from being non-profitable to profitable. It's very key in thinking more about the bottom line and also how you're providing business value.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah,
but
now shifting to something a little bit more fun. What would you say is one vivid memory or moment that you still remember, and something that sticks with you from the office at 409
yeah,
College Avenue?
no, that's a good question. I whenever I think about student agencies, yes, I think there's a lot of stressful situations that we put ourselves in, and it really, I think, hardens or puts us in those business scenarios that I think helps drove me as a leader, but also as a people manager. I think like the vivid image for us is I was president the year before we started the redevelopment project. So we had a very private office, and it was 409 College. It was above the 7-Eleven. And it was an interesting time because we knew that that office was going to end up being a shared space with the university, which we were excited about. But I think it made us cherish it a bit more. And so it became like not only the place where we operated our businesses, but we'd wake up before we go to class. We'd study there. We'd plan for the business there. We would do ops there, go to class, study for finals in that office. Like we weren't going to the libraries. That was our library. And we would go to the finals, come back, and it ended up being like our home base. And I think a lot of us, some of us lived on campus, off campus, in Greek life, in sports teams. But at the end of the day, it was really cool to see all these collective groups, whether you're in Greek life or you're not in Greek life, or you're an athlete or not, to all come back to the same space because we had a shared experience of running a business. And like I think one really cool example was I remember as a Big Red manager, coming back and like, okay, I have to take these two finals. I took the two finals. My mind wasn't on the finals at all. It was on running the Big Red Peak and making sure that we had our ducks in a row. But when I came back, everyone else from Cornellian, campus promotions, hired hands, they were in a Big Red shirt waiting to run Peak with me. And to me, to this day, it's that camaraderie that I think student agencies brings in, where like, yes, you're a part of all these different groups, but 409 College ended up being that hub where we all had a shared goal. And no matter who was going through a pain, whether it was Cornellian and delivering yearbooks to the campus, or hired hands just starting out to do New York moves, and people were stressed out about, how we can get these big 24-foot trucks into the city. We were all there together. And I think that's not one memory, but ultimately the way that office ended up becoming like a second home for us was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, we recently sort of, I wouldn't say remodeled the office, but Gilly and the team kind of reorganized it. It's now private again. It's like closed off from the rest of eHub. So it now is getting that feel. Like we have all the president's pictures up on the wall, including
Nice.
yeah, you're up on the wall with Peter Nolan and all those and Maddie Lieber and all those folks. And now there's everybody has a monitor to work at. We have a little couch sitting area. Uh, and
Ping pong
of
table.
course, and a ping pong table, yeah.
Awesome. That's
So we're really getting that feel back in the office of that camaraderie and that home, as you said, that home away from school. So Willie, what's next on the agenda?
Yeah. So next question would be, looking back at your time at student agencies, what kind of manager were you? Do you have a story that like really shows that type of style and in action?
Yeah. Yeah, and, just real quick, yeah, I'm glad to see that, one of the big reasons why I wanted to be president was to be able to be on that wall, going back to, like, when the images were black and white in the '50s and seeing all that history was always
Went all the way back to 1902.
1902 or even
Yeah.
better. I think we didn't have enough space in the old office, so we always had to kind of pick and choose the years, but it was great. I mean, you saw that history on the wall, and it was amazing, so really glad to hear that. To your question, Willie, I so I think I'm gonna blend a couple of different things here, so we can probably kill a couple birds with one stone. But with student agencies being such a quick tenure, for example, every manager is usually there for like a year, and then they're onboarding the 6 months beforehand. I think there's two types of, or in my years, two types. The managers that come in and just focus on execution, right? They come in. This is the problem I have. This is the ultimate product I'm providing to the campus or to the end user. And then there's others that come in and they try to take a big swing. I at first was more of the executor. And so if you go back to my peak 2013 Big Red peak, like we always had like these legacies like okay, 2013 we operated fairly well. We limited complaints, we limited operational issues, pretty smooth, but top line growth was pretty minimal. And then you have the next year where managers knocked it out of the park when it came to growth. Great marketing strategy, great guerrilla marketing, and then because of that, didn't have that much time to actually focus on the operations, and so ended up the influx in demand ended up not meeting the operational readiness. So I would say that in terms of my style, it was like execute the problem at hand. But it wasn't until I was president that I ended up taking a bit bigger of a swing with some of the technological investments we made. Um, so I do think that it really depends on the year. And so if we had a really big top line year for some of these operational businesses, I always say like, hey, let's focus on operations because some of these businesses you get students as freshmen. If you don't do a good job executing your core value and your core I guess your offering as a business, those students will go elsewhere and you're going to lose them for the next 3 years. And so I always say, it really depends, but I think that it was more of this. I want to be known as the person that like operated well at the very least, like get everything in order, and then if you have the bandwidth, then start to take some bigger swings. I always advocate that managers should be there for more than a year, but then you limit who gets the experience. If you truly want to make an impact, but that's why I think one of the reasons why I ended up staying is because you get a certain perspective when you're there more than 2 years. You see multiple peaks run, you see what the pain points are, you're able to work with the board in a more effective manner. You have a bit more sway and influence. So you're able to say, hey, for example, as president, we need $60,000 to $70,000 to invest in a digital solution. So we're not carrying around paper contracts, which was the big investment that we made during my presidency was taking Big Red from being a paper-based business to a digital business. And a lot of that was because I focused on operations early and then was able to kind of pivot to say, okay, because I went through the operational experience, because I have this background, trust me that I think this is the right move to make from an investment standpoint, which is cool. You kind of see it today, like my job, where I think coming out of college, I worked at Domino's Pizza, corporate. And what they do is they force you to work in the field for like 2 years. It's a rotational program. And I wasn't that excited about, managing restaurants again and slapping pizzas. But ultimately, what that ended up allowing me to do is when I went back to headquarters and said, hey, I've been in the field in Baltimore and Phoenix and Miami, and I've been working with these businesses that we're trying to build for. Here's what I think would be the ultimate value add for technology development. And that's how I sparked myself into product. And so it really stemmed from Big Red, taking an operational issue, being a good executor, using my sway to help influence the board. And then I do that now, I think, in every single role that I've had, where like try to understand the pain points and then use that influence as a good executor to be able to then influence the exec teams, leadership teams, the board of directors to make investments to help move the product forward.
So it's that knowledge of the detail of those stories, day-to-day interactions with, frontline delivery drivers and general managers of stores and customers and, deliveries from vendors that then allows you to have that very specific knowledge base with anecdotes to back all of it up. And of course, data to back all of it up so that you can then go have the conversations about, hey, if we modified this in our tech stack, we would be able to increase margin by that or increase, unit sales by that. And that's always super compelling for executives. And as, someone who's run several of my own businesses, I can tell you, like, when you have someone who has that firsthand knowledge, and can speak with authority to what a customer wants, what an operation looks like, you're definitely listening, right? Versus like pie in the sky ideas of like, oh, well, if we just had this AI tool that did this thing, we would be able to make $1 billion. And you're like, huh, about how's that going to work? So I had a question for you. Like, what's a story that you could tell us? Again, going like that kind of storytelling aspect that I just talked about with like the anecdotes. What's a story you could tell us that might not just paint a rosy picture of the camaraderie and the teamwork and the great stuff that happens at student agencies, but like an oh shit moment, right? Where like something was going to break or someone was going to quit or a customer was going to call the president of the university and everything got fixed, or maybe it didn't. I don't know. What's like a story that can kind of paint a picture of like what you might not be able to see from the website and from our conversation so far?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, it's definitely wasn't rosy. Every that's the fun, I guess, exciting thing about student agencies is that you always had um you always had a different challenge depending on the year, depending on the managers, and that's kind of the variability that you work with. Let me think about that real quick. The first one, I mean, the first one that comes to mind might be around like starting to have responsibility around like meeting expectations for parents. And so I think that was a stark learning where every year we put ourselves in a position as a company to say, trust us with your belongings for Big Red Shipping and Storage. And if we don't, um, if we don't fulfill that promise, shit hits the fan, right? I think, there have been years where we've been in the office answering calls. And I think there was an interesting thing where we said we need an office manager because we need to fulfill calls because we didn't do a good job with operations. So someone's there answering phones, someone's there meeting parents at the door. It was it was a point. It was August peak where I think a lot of the stress ends up happening. Where you really put. Um, we always say that May peak makes the business. When I was there, August peak makes the manager. And so if you're able to bring in that demand and then fulfill in a seamless way, you kind of cross off both ends of those requirements.
Mhm.
Some years, and there was a year I think when Kyle first joined as CEO, we had an August peak, and because of that influx in demand, it was a very rocky um, August, and we didn't have quite the personnel to handle that demand. Am I delaying?
Slightly, but we can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. Maybe let me just turn my camera off and I'll start that story. Hold on. Yeah, we're not using our videos for the podcast, right?
I think we are, but we can move it to audio if we need to.
Okay, cool. All right, give me 1 second actually, just so I can make sure that this story doesn't get interrupted.
Sure, no problem. You do that.
Yeah. 1 second. All right, let's try it. Yeah, so I would say there's the period where we had a very rocky peak. We didn't have enough people, and we had parents waiting outside, calling us, and we didn't, we were like, oh shoot, like we are in a bind. And I remember vividly, we all came in the night before, and Kyle was there, I was there, a bunch of managers were there, and we're like, let's figure out how to solve this operational problem. And at the time, all deliveries and peak happened through two-man teams or two-people teams. And we had trucks, and everyone had their items to deliver, and they'd go and based on where they were on campus, would deliver the items, right? Um, we ended up coming up with a pretty cool solution where we were like, okay, let's actually fill larger trucks across campus and station them in a way where we could drop off. Actually, hold on, hold on. Let me. I think I'm mixing up my stories here. Give me a second. So we this was actually May peak, and in May peak, we had a scenario where we didn't have enough people, and we were not able to fulfill orders in the classic sense of having enough drivers, enough field reps. And so we ended up like spending an all-nighter the night before with the entire management group across student agencies. And we came up with a solution, like we had people in operations research backgrounds like Kyle, Brandon Huang, and we came up with a solution that actually stationed trucks across the different areas of campus. So we minimized the need for having two-man teams, and we were having the field reps go out to these dorms and pick up and bring to these static trucks as opposed to moving the trucks around. And to me, that was one of those experiences where I'm like, if we didn't come up with that solution, we probably would have failed in that peak and would have hurt the business for the next 4 years,
Yeah.
even more so than we would have. And so it's those binds that you get put in, and you have to pull an all-nighter, which might not be the best case. You have to think about, okay, I do have an exam tomorrow, which is great. I'm going to do okay on it. But ultimately, I can't fail these customers that are taking their trust in us. And coming up with a solution and then seeing that solution work as a student is really, really rewarding to see. And I remember after that, we all were celebrating, like, wow, this is great. We should think about utilizing this methodology for Big Red Peak in those very key demand periods, because it's really interesting business where some days you have those 2 days where it spikes up in demand, and now you don't always need to have to hire the same corresponding increase in trucks and drivers. There is a methodology that works. And then I really think that that was one of those experiences where, as things were getting stressful, it really gives a good example of how the team can come together, use different backgrounds, and come up with a solution, and then see that impact the end customer, who are families, who are parents, who are people that are really nervous. It's a stressful environment, and have that impact in that regard is really, really, really rewarding.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's the
We
awesome.
use the same methodology today, actually.
Oh, nice! Really,
Yeah.
the station trucks on the big days.
Yep.
Oh, awesome! I forgot what we called it, like an island. Like, I don't know.
We don't have a name for it. We just say Allen.
Great. Yeah.
Trucks food here, and here. Yeah. Yeah, especially on those 2 or 3 peak days that we get in May, it just is way more efficient.
That's amazing to hear. Wow. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think we have one more question for you.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. To wrap up everything, what's
Yeah.
one decision, a moment, or a conversation from your time at student agencies that still echoes in your life today or leadership?
Okay. I will say, out of anything I've learned in student agencies, putting yourself in these situations for business, optimizing for profits is all great. To this day, I will say one of the things that you really accelerate as student agencies is your emotional intelligence, which is, I think, one of the biggest drivers of career growth, personal development, and I think that ultimately it's a reason why I think a lot of people are successful, even if they aren't in student agencies. But one of the things that I've seen more so than anything else is in my career is when you have someone that you're working with, um, that checks all the boxes, right? And I think one of the biggest boxes to this day that I learned is like, they can be the smartest person in the room, but if they're not easy to work with, they don't do a good job at influencing, they're dictating, those type of personalities can really stunt someone's growth. And the story that I think resonates with me was when I first became I think real estate manager at the time. I wasn't that directly involved with Red. And Kyle came in during peak as a CEO, and the first thing he did that week was, instead of just like observing, he put on some cargo shorts, a big red shirt, and went in a truck with me. And I think Brandon at the time, uh my former roommate, my current roommate Dion, who was the assistant manager at the time, we went over to West Campus. And West Campus, I'm pretty sure they don't have elevators. And we were going through some of those older buildings, 5 stories, 6 stories, with this new CEO and with no AC in the dead heat of the summer, picking up boxes and stairs. And I think from there, it's one of the moments in my life where I'm like, this is how you probably want to lead, um, through through this type of like servant leadership. Like, you want to be in the weeds, especially when it comes to managing businesses that are very operational and stressful, as your first as your first impression on the people that you're going to work with. And no matter how much I learned at student agencies, how to influence a board, how to optimize a better P&L, how to work with software engineers and developers and coming up with requirements for product today, probably one of the biggest things that echoes with me is all the people relationship, people management, working with your peers, which can be tough as a manager. Like, these are some of my best friends today that I work with, and you're in a position of leadership, and now you're working with your friends. How do you effectively manage those guidelines, those lines, right? And I think that's what student agencies puts you in, that you probably don't get in the classroom. And seeing those examples of, okay, this is what I want to model how I operate, like in terms of, I don't want to be the person that comes in and just, reads some line items on a P&L and tries to make some optimizations. I definitely want to be that person that is out there with, the frontline employees, understanding the business. And that's one of those moments that today I think really echoes the way I manage teams, the way I work in the tech industry or the operational industry, restaurant industry. It really comes full circle. And that's why I never remove the student agencies piece of my resume. To this day, if I ever have an interview, it's there. The lines might get shorter, but it's there because I always feel like there's some sort of conversation where I'm talking to someone and explaining what that is. And it really helps explain how you get that early jump start when it comes to ultimately just dealing with people, which can be one of the hardest things to learn and develop over your career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lead from the front, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Turk, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure hearing about your experiences, and we hope that folks out there who are listening find this inspirational.
I hope so too. I'm excited. I got to find some time to visit. It's been a while. It's been maybe 3 or 4 years. So, good luck, Willie, with your upcoming presidency. I'm sure things have changed, and I'm sure I want to learn a little bit more about how AI is impacting student agencies. It's really exciting to me, especially being in the tech industry. But yeah, I appreciate the time, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.